Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Chris Scheller, Minister of Community Life and Learning here, and on behalf of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Greater Lynn, welcome to this Winter Forum, Innovation in Addressing Hunger. From Project Bread data, we know that food insecurity doubled during the pandemic, and that food insecurity for households with children is trending upwards. Food insecurity also disproportionately affects Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as the LGBTQ community. And among the many critical issues that we face as a society today, food insecurity stands out, to me at least, as very fundamental. We all got to eat. And see if you agree with me here. When we help others to meet this most basic need, we find very quickly that our common humanity and this basic necessity for food is so much more important than any of our differences, and more important also than any political view or perspective on the right way, quote unquote, to handle related issues such as housing, immigration, or employment. We've got to get people fed. Amen. So here at UUCGL, we have a vision to create community in partnership with groups and organizations who share our values, such as this. We partner with St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in Lynn to support the operation of their food pantry, which has seen usage increase 2 or 3 times since COVID. We organize meal making once a month for My Brother's Table, and we've held food drives for Anchor Food Pantry, as well as some others in the area. And if you are interested in helping specifically with some of those things that we're doing, I would invite you to speak with Michael Salona. We chose to convene this forum because through our efforts we see that the issue of hunger is growing in a country that typically has an overabundance of food, right? We want to discuss some of the larger issues at play that create situations where more and more people are relying on free food, and also think about new ways of approaching it that may have longer-term positive impacts. And so I will now introduce our panelists. Brendan CRIGHTON is the state senator for the communities of Lynn, Lynnfield, Marblehead, Nahant, Saugus, and Swampscott. Previously, he served on the Lynn City Council and in the House of Representatives. In the last Senate session, he served as the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Transportation, and prior to that was Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Housing. So he's also served on a number of other committees relevant to the discussion today, including Mental Health, Substance Use, and Recovery Joint Committee, and the Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities Joint Committee, and the Public Health Joint Committee. Laura SPATHANAS is the president of the Anchor Food Pantry in Swampscott. Pantry opened in 2020 and serves families in Swampscott and Nahant. The pantry primarily distributes food at a physical location, but also has a delivery component. Since 2022, the pantry has doubled the number of families it supports. Jason Etheridge is the president of Lifebridge North Shore. Lifebridge is a social services nonprofit that provides support for the homeless and underserved by offering shelter, community meals, day drop-in centers, and supportive services. It began as a program of the Crombie Street Congregational Church in Salem and now has locations in Salem, Beverly, and Gloucester. And Norris Guthert is a program coordinator with the Lynn Public Health Division, where he leads the Lynn Food Security Task Force and its efforts to coordinate resources and address the issue of food security. Norris is also the Massachusetts Food System Collaborative's Equity Network Policy Manager, where he works on statewide agriculture and food equity policies. This includes advancing legislation to address the issue of racial equity in agriculture. So now I'd like to hand this over to our two moderators for the panel today, Michael Salona and Martha Curry. Take it away.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you to the speakers and panelists for coming here today. Martha and I are going to help moderate a conversation among the panelists, and then we'll open it up to questions and comments from those in attendance. Again, we see this as more conversational than really anything else. So we know that the need has risen since COVID and has not decreased. We asked our speakers to this event to discuss what they are seeing in the community in new approaches or ideas that they are currently pursuing or wish to pursue to address this issue in different ways, and what us as activists can do to support them. Again, this is meant to be more conversational, allow an exchange of ideas between the panelists and also those of us in the audience. So for the first question, I'm going to hand this over to Martha. Take it away.
I think I'm on, yes. I'll start with Norris, but you'll all have this question. Can you describe some of what you're seeing in the community right now and maybe how that compares to pre-COVID?
Oh, you got to turn it on. Yeah.
Testing.
Yes.
Here we go. Thank you for the question. Thanks, everyone, for having me here today. It's an honor to be at the birthplace of community psychology. The Swampscott Conference happened here in 1965, and those strategies have impacted my work pretty heavily. So to answer the question, before, like pre-COVID, food wasn't looked at as vitally. For example, there were less food delivery options. Access was stymied. Medical integration options, you didn't see as much food as medicine. It was looked at as kumbaya science, if you will, an area that didn't have much bearing on health, little to no funding, and there wasn't as much cross-sectoral work by the government and state departments. Post-COVID now, you're seeing more food delivery options. You're seeing more stores delivering food. You're seeing more nonprofits incorporating deliveries into their programming, expanded access. There are new ways to access SNAP and HIP funding, formation of new groups dedicated to food. For example, the Food Security Task Force in Lynn was a direct response to COVID. There's a North Shore Farming Coalition, which is a group of North Shore municipalities that's happening, targeted funding, the Food Security Infrastructure Grant, policy. Our state's own Jim McGovern went to the White House and really drove the Biden-Harris administration to look at nutrition and food security as a problem for the United States, and he's had tremendous progress there. So I'd say that's the major difference between pre and post-COVID.
Should I just continue?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Brendan Crichton, your state senator. It's an honor to be here, an honor to represent you at the State House. This is my first public appearance in 2 weeks. I had a shoulder replacement, which you may have noticed on the way in. So I've only talked to my 7- and 3-year-old children and my wife. So if I'm socially awkward, even more so than I normally am, I apologize. But it's an honor to be here, and this conversation is so important for all of us to have. And I certainly, as a legislator, and I'm sure Jenny would attest to this as well, we rely so much on the work being done at the ground level. Everyone at this table, which I'm humbled to be at, because you guys are on the ground level doing the actual work. But when we're going to advocate for funding, and let's be honest, most times it is funding, it is attached to a dollar. We need to be able to tell and articulate what's happening on the ground levels in our community, across our district. So the work that's being done by the folks at this table are crucial to what we do. I have a whole list of things that we've done kind of since the pandemic in terms of investments, but I'm not going to go line item by line item. I think my overall message, what I see, is that food insecurity was a priority of all, I'm sure. I've been at the State House now 17 years. I previously worked for Senator McGee when he was there for 10 years. So I got to see it as a staffer, as a state rep, now as a senator. it's always kind of there. Like, we support the food project, we support local communities, but it's not something that I think we felt a sense of urgency on, where it has risen to a level of among other issues like, keeping people in their homes and housing, transportation, healthcare, those type of things. Food insecurity now is up there, and some of the numbers are discussed earlier. But when nearly 1/3 of Massachusetts adults experienced food insecurity in 2021, I mean, it's just remarkable for a state with as many resources as we have and the wealth that we have, that we're unable to feed folks. And I think you'll see this session, there's a few bills that I think are sparked by kind of this awakening of sorts. One in particular there that I think is a no-brainer. It does come with a cost, as all these do, but during COVID, we had extended meals for our students, regardless of their ability to pay. Just free. If you're in our school system, you can have meals. And obviously, it's crucial to learning outcomes and overall health of these students, but it's a real no-brainer. It should not be something that any family or any student should be thinking about. So there's a good bill out that I'll be supporting to extend those provisions indefinitely, so it's not just a COVID-era policy, but rather a state policy. Because if we're going to talk about fundamental rights that every human, every person should be entitled to, having a good meal should be the bare minimum. So again, I thank folks for organizing this, and for all the folks here and in the crowd that are doing the work on the ground level. Look forward to continuing this two-way conversation as we get into this next session. Thank you.
And Laura SPATHANAS from the Anchor Food Pantry. So to answer this question, looking at it pre-COVID to COVID is a little difficult for us, because we actually opened March 23rd, 2020, the week after schools closed. We had been in the works about 2 months, January and February 2020, to bring this food pantry to Swampscott, which didn't exist in the form that it exists now. There certainly was supports, particularly within the churches, supporting families. So in February, we created the Anchor Food Pantry and figured we'll take some time, we'll open up, we'll find a location, and then March of 2020 came, and the town officials had reached out, kind of knew that we were planning this, and said, "Are you ready to start?" Obviously we weren't, but we got ready. We took that week, and we, on the March 23rd, started handing out first bags of food. So it's hard to say, what that need changed. It took a few months to really build up. I think that our initial group of folks we were supporting were folks that were already really in need, and maybe hadn't been receiving services or been receiving them somewhere else. And then slowly through those months of the spring and summer, we got new visitors who, it was really a product of losing jobs during that time, and this was something they had never had to do before, reach out for help. And so that's, hard to say. But I on this question, I did want to talk about, like Brendan said, the universal free lunch program. That is one thing that did come from COVID here in Swampscott. That is how we reached out to our first groups of people, other than through the senior center we did. And then we stood outside of the high school every day while lunches were passed out daily. And that was how we reached families and let them know that we're here for them, and got them in to receive food during that time. You're here, I'm so happy to hear what you're saying, because the truth is we can go every week and be there for our neighbors and provide food, and that is important, but there's so much greater things that need to be done so that we don't have to be here. I mean, our goal is not to have to have a food pantry, so that our residents are food secure and our neighbors are food secure. And that is, as I know there's going to be a lot of different discussion through this morning, but that is one thing As a public school teacher, as the president of the food pantry, universal free lunch and extending it for vacations and summers is key for our families and our neighbors. Thank you.
Well, my name is Jason Etheridge, and I'm the president of Lifebridge North Shore, located in Salem, but we have other locations. And I am grateful to be here, not only because I'm with these amazing folks and this congregation, but my organization is actually running a polar plunge today. So in about 10 minutes, if I wasn't here, I'd be jumping in the water in Beverly. So I am grateful and thank you. This is interesting. Pre-COVID, if we think pre-COVID seems like really long ago. I guess it was only a few years, but I remember an organization that had 400 volunteers who would come in every night. Not all at once, but throughout the year to serve dinner to the people that we serve. Over 100 meals every night to anyone who wanted one. COVID came along and the volunteers were gone. And then you think of the volunteers who'd bring in the donations of the different foods, even if we were to prepare it, and they were gone. The stores you would get some of the vegetables from, they were closed. So we really, pre-COVID, well-run oil machine, we were doing it, and people were getting access to food. So what happened during COVID? The access was different. We had to come up with innovative ways to actually get the food to the people who needed it. And in our case, we're talking about folks who might not have eaten in days, or most of the time, by the time they get to Lifebridge, one of our locations, they haven't had much food, sustainable food or healthy food. Pre-COVID, it worked. During COVID, we had to figure it out. Now, what are we seeing? Innovation. Right? We are looking at meals to go, and I'm talking, I want to say innovation, but practical. I think the hallmark of what we have been doing is getting back to basics. Giving a bag of food to someone who's homeless that has to be prepared, on the face of it sounds good, except they don't have anywhere to make that food. And if they're in a house with other people, sometimes they don't have a stove that works. Now, these are things that they're okay. We figure them out as we go. A lot more prepared meals, trying to be innovative with local businesses, going to a small restaurant in your town, ordering food from them to go be served at the local shelter, for example, became an amazing thing for both the business, the people who wanted to donate, and the folks who needed the food, right? So we really got back to basics and mobilized, got people out on the street. The senator talked about getting food to the places where they need to be through delivery, right? And that's where we went. So post-COVID, we're better for what we're doing. We also have a lot of folks who are trying to catch up. Who might have tried to figure out where that community meal was in their community, and that's another thing, I think we'll get into it later, but access to information. A lot of the people that are food insecure need to know where to go to get the food, and how do you get that out there, and how do you do it? So, what are we seeing? Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of folks deciding whether they should pay their rent or buy extra food at Market Basket, right? And I didn't hear anyone talk about it, but inflation. I don't know anyone here who hasn't gone shopping in a while and seen the increase in cost of food. We're sort of at something here, the cusp of something. I want to, our organization is going to continue to pivot, but in this case, I would say we're better off. I don't think we've solved the problem, and I look forward to some more robust discussion on some of the innovative ways that are coming down the line that I think we can all be more involved in.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. One, I guess, observation, and then we can move into kind of the next topic, is around free lunches for children, or free food for children. It's something that went on in Lynn during the pandemic, and I think there's also a balancing act, though, that has to go along with the quality of food that's being provided. Just as someone would pick my kids up at school, the trash cans are filled with free food that is thrown out because either the quality is not very good or they don't want it. So it's also, I think, to a certain extent, kind of building the infrastructure and planning for those types of situations where either or they have just too many oranges. Where can we redirect, which is an important part of it. So, Jason, I'm not going to go back to you, I guess, because do you mind? Sure. You be on the hot seat? Okay.
I will actually be probably the simplest answer to that question as, we tend not to work with school
Sure.
children, but what I heard in there is, something around food waste. And I think the last time I checked, 1/3 of all food in this country goes to waste. And that's from the USDA, and it's a bit of a rabbit hole of a problem to get down to. I'm not talking about the food you throw away that your leftovers, although that counts too, but we're talking about excess crops, we're talking about supply chain issues, we're talking about a lot of different ways where food ends up in landfills. So there's actually an environmental issue when we talk about wasted food, and we're just on the cusp of figuring out how to change those policies. Right, so what have I seen to combat that? I know of programs where they're putting food, when it's specific to children, putting food in backpacks and sending them home with extra food over the weekend. Again, I think we have to step back and say, who are we giving what? Are we culturally appropriate when we send food home with children from diverse populations? Peanut butter and jelly isn't great for everyone. And that might get thrown away if it gets sent to the wrong household. So while I don't have many solutions to that or can talk most about it, but I do see communities doing more to get the food to where it has to be, and I think we're getting closer.
Thank you. So kind of like following along that, it's actually, I wrote culturally appropriate in my notes before that, because as we volunteer with one of our food pantries, again, you get a mix of individuals coming to the food pantry, and some of them are very familiar with a loaf of bread, and as part of the basic American diets, and other people don't eat bread or have no interest in something that was incredibly processed and spit out by a machine. But along those lines, are there other approaches or resources to either access that kind of food that you've tried since COVID that you have found to be particularly useful?
Well, it seems to me that a lot of the food we have, either we buy or is donated, can be made appropriate for the people who want it. It's actually that first step where you have to listen.
Yeah.
And we see in a homelessness organization, it's really the great equalizer. We see folks from all different cultures and religions and backgrounds, and to find out that someone is Muslim and has certain dietary restrictions, sometimes that happens after we've already served a meal that would have been inappropriate.
Yeah.
And we didn't take that step to ask who needs what. So it has made us better to start asking what we can do, because the food is there. I think that's what we're finding out. The food, it's there. It's how do we use it appropriately and responsibly. So I'm sort of more at the first step of this, listening and making sure we hear back from the different folks we're serving, but what would be good for them.
Thank you. All right. So, of course, I want to talk about the school lunches, but I will go on to something else. And back to Brendan, that I agree wholeheartedly. It's important, but we need to listen to each community and what do they want for food. Just because you're hungry and you hear this, well, they don't have food, they should just take what is being offered. That is so, it's rude and it's mean, and we really shouldn't think that way. We should be providing for folks what they'll eat, and what their culture allows them to eat and what they want to eat. But I love this topic because when Anchor first opened, we were bagging food. We sort of, we had sort of taken over from the Interfaith Food Pantry. They gave us an idea of what they provided in their monthly bags, and that was how we created our bags of food. And so we would just go out shopping, we would make these bags and have them available. We were fortunate to be supported by Salvation Army and Lynn, and would receive their boxes of pre-made boxes of food, and that's what we were giving out. Our plan always was to be a choice pantry, and that means that visitors come into the pantry and they shop our shelves. And allowing families to do that really limits the waste, because you're making a bag and you think, you don't know what this family, do they want Cheerios? Do they want Raisin Bran? You don't know who's getting that bag of food. So allowing them to come in, we really get eyes on what's leaving the shelves, what's not, so that we can adjust our monthly ordering, so that we really have things on the shelves that families need and want. And we limit that waste. And I think we're a small pantry, but we have, as he said at the beginning, we have doubled in size because of grocery prices, because of gas prices, but we're still small in that we can have these great conversations with our neighbors and visitors and hear, if they have special dietary needs, and we try. We can't always maybe get that, but we can try and bring that in on the shelves. I think that the waste is reduced because of our ability to have choice. And we'll probably can talk more about this as we go on, but we do partner with Spur and Shoebies now, and we get through a food rescue program. And so we do get food that they wouldn't be able to sell like the next day, but they bring it into us, and we're able to give it to our visitors to enjoy that evening or maybe the next day for lunch. That is really small program, and it needs to become much bigger.
Thank you, Laura. I don't know how much more I have to add on this particular topic. I do just want to say, too, that we just regrouped as a legislature. We're just getting to session now. I think 7,000 bills filed. And one of the things we take a look at every 2 years in our session is our committee structure and what our committees are focused on. So you have I was the chair of the Joint Committee on Transportation. You have housing, healthcare, all kind of really high-level topics that the bills get funneled through in our carefully reviewed public hearings. It's a major part of the legislative process, and both the House Speaker and the Senate President this year switched up some of the committees, and they decided we want to have a committee on agriculture. But having it to look at these issues as well. It's not just about farming necessarily, to have it look at supply chain, food insecurity, talk about the wasting of food, all of that. So I think it just again highlights how big of a priority this has become, and certainly this question will be a topic that committee will look into. And then just wanted to highlight one bill, and this isn't my bill, so I can't brag about it, but it's an act encouraging the donation of food to persons in need. So every year, thousands of tons of edible food are sent to landfills, simply because donors are concerned about liability issues, and that diverting it to those in need would be too costly maybe for them. So these bills would provide civil liability protection for individuals and food establishments that want to donate food directly to consumers, as well as a tax credit to Massachusetts farmers to help on some of those cost issues. So just wanted to flag those two issues. Turn it over to Norris.
Thanks, excuse me. Thanks, Senator. I don't have a great deal to add, but I was really happy to hear Senator Crichton mention policy and bills, because that's one way to address farm to school, the whole school food conversation, and also waste. And he beautifully just articulated a bill that would go to address waste. But in terms of school food, just wanted to add, there's a role that local government and local programming can play. Especially in a community like Lynn, which is super, super diverse. I always use this analogy, but it's the difference between offering a potato and a plantain. You've got to know who's in your community and offer resources that suits that. You've got to cook in culturally relevant ways as well. I know that sounds weird, but for someone from the Dominican Republic who's used to cooking in certain ways, maybe there are, or at least in Lynn, there are programs that teaches you how to cook in some of those same ways, but healthier, so that's part of it as well. You've got to make sure it's culturally relevant. But yeah, I think just to highlight again, these conversations are happening more in depth, like post-COVID. I don't think there would be as much of a focus, or remembering back, there wasn't as much of a focus. So I'm sure as bills are introduced and local government gets more involved, we'll see some really clever ways of addressing or beginning to address some of these issues.
Our last question is, what gets you excited looking into the future about how to make headway on the issue? And I also have a favorite question unrelated to food, but day-to-day life. Some people have heard me. And actually, Norris and I were talking about this a little bit. I'm rephrasing it, but what part of your work brings you joy and gives you the strength to continue doing the work? Because it's challenging, and you have to make sure. So anyways, what are you excited about? I'm going to go ahead, Norris.
Testing. Yep. Thank you. That's a really great question, and something that's pretty near and dear to me. I mean, in both of my roles, I'm taking care of where I'm from. My role in the city of Lynn, I grew up in Lynn. I'm a Lynn boy, and so to be able to go off and learn these strategies and implement them in the city that I grew up in, and to see results, that brings me a bunch of self-satisfaction in my work with the collaborative impacts the region, the state, and I'm biased obviously, but Massachusetts is the greatest state in the country, and so very simply helping others. I know it's cliche, but helping others, and it's that much more impactful to me because I'm taking care of where I'm from. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm trying to think back. I grew up in Lynn. I was, like all kids, I was hungry all the time, but I had food available to me. So it was kind of a foreign concept. I mean, you'd see, the commercials on TV, and you'd see people hungry in other countries, but you never thought about it really at home or back in Lynn or Massachusetts. And I had a chance to work at the Gregg Neighborhood House in Lynn. It's an after-school, out-of-school time program for many years, and some great kids there, many with challenging home lives. And I remember one of my colleagues, another staffer, buying some food for just one kid at some point. I'm like, hey, this is going to sound cold, but I'm like, why are you doing that? We have hundreds of kids here. Like, you can't just buy. And he goes, if you knew, what his home situation was and how hungry this kid is all the time, like, you would buy him food too. And I started to notice more and more, just the kids, they weren't hungry like me and my brother were hungry at home, and we're like just getting our fifth bowl of cereal for the day. Like, they were hungry because they did not have adequate food, and really the Gregg House was their food for most of their day and week. And then, so that was kind of early on in life, and then later on, working with the Rotary, going down to the food pantry in Lynn, and having this concept, this idea in my head that the food pantry was for those very, very low income, really people that are just struggling to get by, and not realizing how quickly that I saw a constituent, a neighbor, random people that you just pass all the time and have no idea that they are having issues around food insecurity. So those two experiences for me kind of brought this issue. I mean, working with Tom, obviously he was big on this for many years too, but kind of raised this issue more so. And I guess I'm really excited that now, because of all the work that's done by folks here today and across the Commonwealth, it's not like begging for attention. I guess that's what I'm excited about, that there's a ton of research and work, and that the advocates are constantly getting to us so that we can make informed decisions and make this a priority, whereas I think 17 years ago when I started, that's not the case. So that's very exciting. And then just in terms of what excites me every day, it's going to sound cheesy, I'm just going to say what Norris is, but for 17 years, every day I get to help someone, hopefully succeed at that, or at least we're trying, and we're working together with our staff and our team and the delegation. So great to have Rep. Armini here today as well. So it's the best job in the world. I love it. It's so fulfilling to be able to try to help people in a wide range of issues. So very grateful to be in this role.
Just because it bounces off of some things that Brendan was saying, I'll start with kind of what brings me joy and why I do this, and then talk about some things we're excited about. to continue down the line, also a Lynner, born and raised, actually grew up around the corner from Brendan. Grew up with parents who are so given and full of public service, continue to serve. My mom's on the board at my brother's table. We've been serving there since we were kids and just part of that community. But I do tell people in the pantry, I tell this story a lot. I never went to a food pantry. You know, just like Brendan, we had in our home. But in my 20s, when I first came home from college, I was very fortunate. I moved into an apartment that my parents owned, paid very little rent, lived on my own, and I drove a car that my parents bought for me when I was in college, had a nice job, but I couldn't have done those things without the support of my family. Every Sunday, I went to my mother's house after church. She made a Sunday dinner. I did my laundry there for free. I went through her cabinets to stock my apartment, you know. So no, I wasn't going to Salvation Army or another pantry in Lynn, but my food was and my needs were being supplemented by somebody. I could not have done it on my own. So when people come into Anchor Food Pantry, that's what I want them to feel like. They're coming into a family member's house and they're getting their sugar, they're getting their soups for the week. So that's just something I think of, and that is what drives me to provide for people, because you don't know people's story. You know, I drove a cute little car, convertible, and I didn't have any money in my bank account, and I was living on my own. And you know, you may see folks driving a nice car, or have a nice home, but that could be all you don't know if someone gave that to them, if that's all they have. You know, you don't know what's in their bank account. You don't know what their life's struggle is. You don't know what their health is. So that's just really important to always think of. And I do get to know those stories, though, at the Anchor Food Pantry, because we develop relationships, and I love each and every person that comes in our door, and I know their stories, and no one else needs to know. I don't need to know their story. They can just come in. But everybody has a story. You all have a story. We all need something. So that's what brings me joy, and that's why I do it. I do something every single day for the food pantry. I have a full-time job. I have 3 teenage daughters, but I work really hard to make sure our neighbors are provided for, and that brings me joy. It's not, you know, I do it because it makes me feel good. But some things I'm excited about, Jason sort of mentioned it as well, as the backpack program. So right now we provide snacks to all of our schools. We run a program, we fundraise, and we buy snacks for each of our school nurses in Swampscott, the high school, and the middle school, and the elementary schools, as well as the Johnson Elementary School in Nahant, so that any child that does not have a snack or is hungry that day can go to the nurse and get something. So that's one thing that I'm really proud of that we've started, but we want to extend that to a weekend backpack program, so that on the weekends, they are bringing food home to be prepared and to be able to eat when they're not getting those breakfasts and lunches like they are during the school week. So that's something. It takes a lot of work, though. We're trying, you know, we're so busy, so we're just trying to get by every week. But we've got the idea. It's just a matter of time and getting people to support us.
So, you know, I'm unlike my colleagues. I wasn't born and raised in Lynn. I was born and raised in East Boston, the oldest of 11 children, and my youngest brother is still in high school. It's strange, but it's but I did. This is a trivia a point. I lived next door to Mike for 10 years in Lynn. So at some point, I migrated that far north from East Boston to Lynn. I have recently migrated even further to West Newbury, and I'll tell you, that is totally different than East Boston or Lynn. But my best 10 years, and I was telling Mike this earlier, was Lynn, because of the sense of community. I crave that sense of community. You know who your neighbors are, and we'd see each other, and his family's in the audience, and I know who they are. You know, I don't have that where I am right now, but Lynn is a very special place. So I am very defensive of Lynn, if anyone wants to ask. But you know, what brings me joy, you know, growing up the oldest of 11 in a 3-bedroom apartment in East Boston, we didn't have a lot of food. We didn't have a lot of resources. I didn't know I was poor. I had no idea. I didn't know I was food insecure. I still don't know that. You know, I was loved. You know, I had 2 amazing parents, an amazing family, an amazing community. I was provided hope, you know, and I think that's what I enjoy most about what I get to do every day, is being part of something that provides hope and love for people who might not otherwise have it. And, you know, the exciting part is talking about it. And being in a group like this to start the conversation. You know, nothing happens unless we start the conversation. I have learned so much about food insecurity in the past 2 years specifically. I had no idea where the food desert was, you know, and all of a sudden we're seeing communities that we're part of, food deserts pop up in Massachusetts, in the Northeast, in Essex County. You're telling me that there are places where people cannot have access to healthy, nutritional food because of overdevelopment. Right? So this is exciting when you start getting down there, and to even talk about food waste. For me, hunger always got buried under homelessness or poverty or something else. And here we see it rising up to the top, and that's exciting. And it's exciting to be here with you and the fact that you want to all have this conversation. So thank you.
Q&A. Oh, it's for afterwards, but yeah. No, it's well. Thank you though. If it was prepared, perhaps, but no, that's fine. That's fine. No, that's for afterwards. It's going to be an example of some of the food that's given out at St. Stephen's Food Pantry. Often, again, we talk about, oh, the food is distributed, you know, giving out food. It's like, well, what does that actually look like? And we have some great volunteers here from St. Stephen's, Pam and Jay, and the Indomitable, and Joyce. Oh, no, believe me, I was trying to use an adjective, but Joyce is here as well, so I lost it in that sense. So I think now we're going to turn it over to the audience to ask questions. I'm going to ask Bruce Campbell. Oh, yep. If he wouldn't mind to come down and pick up the microphone, and he'll walk over. If you have a comment or a question for the panelists.
Hello, Senator, everyone, thank you so much. I grew up in a country where hunger and food insecurity is just a norm. Even to the fact that seeing my classmates, it's like not having lunch, it's just like, okay, I have lunch, he doesn't have lunch. And I came to this country as an adult, knowing that this is a first world country, and for me to experience that there are still people who are hungry, just make me realize that it's a global problem. My recommendations to the providers, especially to the providers, is to be creative and to have a massive education. Because now that I'm a city councilor in Lynn, I still don't know where to send some of my constituents. I volunteered in a lot of a food program, but people will wait for hours just to get a bread and few vegetables. And after that, they will just throw it away because it's not aligned with their dietary requirement or religious beliefs. I think being creative is important. When you provide education, you need to specify if you're into Dominican food or a Latin American, this is the best place to go because it goes both ways. Either you're wasting food, but at the same time, you're delivering to the right people. And to Senator CRIGHTON, I'm a big fan, Senator, and I'm really pushing for that legislation because it's really, really important. You've seen them everywhere. They've thrown it everywhere. If you could push that the soonest possible time. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mary Gatlin, and I'm a resident of Lynn. I'm always just curious what I can do, you know, as an individual, what makes the most impact, because I will volunteer at food pantries, and when I can, I write a check, and I do, you know, I do the things I can, but I wonder, you know, what do you guys think in terms of individuals? What are the most impactful things that we can do to make a difference in our communities?
Get wider, kind of, as we go down, because is it on? Yep.
Yeah.
Because we're obviously at the food pantry, and for us, it is volunteering. We've been very fortunate with, right now, with donations, monetary donations. Obviously, we can always take that, but there's, you know, there's only so much a small group of people can do. So we are really looking right now. I know we are at the pantry, and as Jason talked about, those pre-COVID, through COVID, you really lost so many volunteers. Some of them are coming back. I know at Anchor we have this amazing group that worked right through the pandemic, and they, you know, that was a lot for people to come out, and we didn't know what was going on, and you know, to be around people and be listening to the news, and it was scary. But we had a great group that did, and we've have expanded on that. But volunteering, just either to come in and work when we're open, or to, like I said, we want to do this backpack project. But you know, we're a group of 12 board of directors. We all do something. We all already have a job on the pantry, whether it's, you know, doing our senior delivery program. Everyone does something, running food drives. So if someone's able to like come in and just say, what do you guys need? And, you know, really just take the reins on a project so that we can do more, because we want to do more, but you know, there's only so many hours in a day. So for me at the pantry, I would say volunteering is number one, and just being willing to do whatever we ask. I don't know. But that's what I would say. And you can find us on Facebook, on our website page.
Of course, for folks who are involved in nonprofits, donations always help, and volunteerism is essential. We leverage a lot of volunteers across our organizations. If you asked me this question 2 years ago, it would be different. I would say now it's about activism. Now it's about advocating. Now it's about, you know, as we leave here today, bringing this forward into the community, not being afraid to ask the restaurant you're at what they do with the stuff that doesn't get used. You know, it's about making sure that as a community we start bringing this up a notch. And, you know, again, we need all those other things, but I'm getting the sense that without activism and disruption, and, you know, to hear Senator read that amazing bill, right? It's on us now to make sure we talk to our legislators and say, this is important. This is important for our communities. So, I mean, you know, what can you do? I'd say being more vocal, and I'm not suggesting any people aren't, but doing more of this. You know, this is amazing. So I would say activism, advocacy, and not being ashamed to talk about the issues that are affecting us, our neighbors, and the people we want to serve.
Thanks. Just to quickly build off that, I think there's a large amount of folks in any of our districts as legislators that just don't know that they can pick up the phone and call us or send us an email, and that we're actually looking at it and that we're seeing it. If a constituent reaches out to a rep or a senator, immediately, you know, it comes full attention. You know, our ears open up. We really want to deliver. We really want to hear what folks are saying and to help out. So to that extent, I welcome you, as I know Rep. Armini would as well, to reach out to us on this topic or any others and just have a conversation. Believe me, it's like some days are hard with this job when you get in, some days are hard, and when you get a call from a constituent, you can actually talk about policy and separate, personalities and politics, and let's just talk about policy. Tell me your story. What happened? Like, that gives us a little more strength to get going. So, selfishly, I'm asking you to call to cheer me up. But no, but your input is very valuable to us.
Thanks for that, Senator. I'm actually going to piggyback and say that, as a resident, or you should be contacting your local elected officials. They do want to hear from you. Given my work with the collaborative, you'd be surprised how open they are to having honest conversations about stuff that's going to help, their constituents. Get involved also, and by that I mean look at Lynn Grows. You need to look at mechanisms where you as a resident are involved in the conversations that are happening locally. And Lynn Grows is a resident-led steering committee. They've done everything from identifying food priorities for the city to being a major mechanism of Phoenix Food Hub, and Phoenix Food Hub is a one-stop food clinic, if you may, that addresses all the social and clinical determinants of health, going back to things that I'm excited about. But you won't drive really far changes like that without really engaging your legislators and your local elected officials and your local government. And for the leaders, they have to be ingenuitive and think outside of the box. It's 2023, and strategies and policy needs to adapt with the time. Again, pointing to Phoenix Food Hub as what I think is an example of residents being involved in good policy and targeted funding, and just really be in the know, be passionate, and try to stay in the loop. I know easier said than done, because there's lots of different information sources and things happening, but I think that's the most important thing that you, the individual resident, can do, is just be engaged and stay involved.
Norris, one of the things that I noticed, that I think got some of us excited, was the Phoenix Food Hub. Do you mind for those who don't know, do you mind describing that a little? And
I'm glad you asked.
Softball.
Phoenix Food Hub is a one-stop hub to address the social and clinical determinants of health for food. Breaking down all of that fancy talk, it's a building with a state-of-the-art teaching kitchen. It's connected to Lynn Community Health Center, who does like food insecurity screenings. There's a nurse on staff, a dietitian on staff. There's programming space, a whole staff that addresses the issue of food. And more so, this is an initiative that's spearheaded from City Hall, the Public Health Division, and also the Food Security Task Force, GLIS being the lead agency, because it's on the Silsby Street location. But going back to that, we're really excited about that. I believe that's like a first in the state kind of initiative, and that goes back to everything we were talking about thinking outside of the box, engaging residents. By the way, Lynn Grows is a vital mechanism in that, that steering committee is involved or kept in the loop, or it has decision-making power in what happens there. So going back to the whole be engaged, and local leaders should be involving the residents. But it's just, obviously I'm biased, but it's really exciting to see that something came about after the pandemic and the conversations about food, and it's really something special to have that being spearheaded in Lynn, which I know will impact the region, and yeah, so really excited to have that going.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Vicki Poulos. I live in Lynn, and I just wanted to mention a couple of things, but we should have introduced Jenny or Hermine since we have two of our reps here. So anyone engaged in activism can corral them or put them on the spot right now, which I'm about to do. So I brought a couple of flyers that I work at a place called the Massachusetts Law Reform Institute that folks in my office who do nutrition work bought. They're on the table out there. We haven't talked too much about the SNAP program, which is a huge federal program, state administered, a lot of state options about how it operates to feed people. And there are two pretty imminent crises now. One is there's been extra money in SNAP during COVID, and the last of those extra allotments is coming in early March. So that's going to be a huge cliff for people who will have, I think, minimally $90 less to spend on food when food prices are going up, and for some people, it will be a much bigger drop-off than that. There's also a flyer on skimming, which is this really nefarious thing where thieves have stolen the value of people's SNAP cards, but all this is, there are policy issues here. SNAP, your EBT card for SNAP, unlike our credit cards, they don't have that little chip. They're not secure. They're produced by the state and the feds, and they elected not to make them secure, so they're more susceptible to thievery. And until recently, stolen benefits weren't being replaced. So Congress changed that prospectively, but there's currently, in a supplemental budget that the governor has introduced, money to fill the gap for some people who had their SNAP benefits stolen and wouldn't be protected by this change in federal law, which is as of a certain date, so it doesn't pick up people before that date. It also, the supplemental budget wouldn't eliminate the cliff, but it would sort of make it a little less steep by providing more money for people. And my understanding is the free school meals for this year is going to run out of funds unless that gets money. So that will probably pass. I'm sure Brendan and Jenny are both supporting it, but it really needs to pass soon. So that's my pitch. Oh, actually, my question. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about SNAP and SNAP policy options, which is definitely a place for activism since it's a federal as well as, even if our state reps are on board, some things have to happen at the federal level.
Thanks for that, Vicki. And that goes back to elected officials and local officials really needing to engage. And by that, so we're aware that's happening, and we know that conversations are also happening at the state level as well. I can say, based on history, our legislature has been really receptive to food programs and safeguarding that, and so we're expecting more of the same. I also, from the local level, part of the lessons that we've learned from the pandemic is that inflation, economic issues, or any issue really ties in to food insecurity. And so there should be some plans to mitigate that in the short term, but absolutely right. You know, more long-term measures need to happen, and I'm sure that's being discussed. And again, given how our legislature at the state responded to COVID-19 during the pandemic with food, I am confident that they'll address or look at and address some of these issues as well.
Just real quickly, you know, all this is on our radar, Vicki. I mean, obviously it has a federal component as well as a state component. I think one area of concern that I think it was at a lobby day recently or just reading in the news, and it's been out there for quite some time, but we have these benefits that folks are eligible for at the federal level. I mean, huge lifelines for folks. But there are so many people, thousands of residents across our Commonwealth that aren't eligible because of you know, immigration status or you know, other issues. How do we fill that gap? If the federal government's not going to step up and help those folks, how in Massachusetts can we make sure that they're getting the resources that they need? So I look forward to working. There's a lot of folks that are really focused on this issue. I should also say too, I'm very grateful for the work being done at the municipal levels of government. And I want to give a shout out to Council Ward 3, Coco, Alan Sugg, who spoke earlier, and also Select Board Member Peter Spilios, who are here and doing great work there. So it really is all three levels, local, state, and federal level, coming together to make sure that, that nobody's going hungry. So thank you.
I'm going to, again, obviously speak on this as how I see it at the pantry. And we've talked a lot about having food, allowing, and we think of it as allowing people to be healthy. We want them to have healthy food. But besides physical health, our mental health, it affects so much. When you don't have access, you can't feed your kids, your parents are hungry, you're hungry, you know, you're trying to get a job or trying to keep a job, and you have no energy to sustain that, and just constantly on your mind, what am I gonna eat tomorrow? Will I eat tomorrow? And then, it seems to me, and I'm gonna keep it positive. You know, when I hear, you know, we've free lunch programs, universal free lunch from COVID, but it's always out there, like Vicki said. It's, well, we're probably not gonna have money for it, we're probably not gonna have it next year, and maybe we are, because you guys are fighting for it. But think of how stressful that is when you rely on those meals, and you've gotten now 3 years where we think this is a thing now. We are, you know, where my kids are gonna have these 2 meals a day. And then it's constantly hanging over your head that you might not. We're probably going to, but how stressful. And why do we do that to people? Sorry. You know, in the EBT, you know, cards, and, you know, really just kind of take, you know, the pandemic, the PEBT, the pandemic EBT, and for the students, and it sort of just ends very abruptly with no, you know, maybe folks who are in charge of these programs know that these are coming and happening, but the people receiving them don't always know. I remember when the PEBT stopped, and it was abrupt, and then it does fall on us because we see our numbers go up. When inflation goes up, when the grocery price, the gas prices go up, we're the ones there supporting these families to help them. Again, you guys are doing great. The folks in this room that are at these levels are doing the work. But back to, I know everyone answered Mary's question so awesomely, and I was a little selfish and just said, come work for me. But that, we have to fight. We have to fight for these groups. These are, as mentioned at the beginning, these are, you know, minority groups. These are elderly. These are, you know, we have half of the visitors at Anchor Food Pantry are senior citizens living here in Swampscott. And, now we have seen an influx of Ukrainian refugees coming in, and we're taking care of them at Anchor. You know, we're providing for them. So we need help. And we need to, you know, really just think about what this makes people feel like.
It's a good conversation because I've heard a few things come out as based on one question. You know, mental health. You could have all the food in the world, if you don't know what to do with it or how to use it, or you know, are just unsure how to access it. I mean, these are all things that relate back to some of these behavioral health issues that we're seeing. Look at the current news. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs when it comes to behavior and mental health. And so there is a correlation there. I suggest we don't talk about everything. Well, let me rephrase. We have to focus on that. If we're going to help with food insecurity, mental health is going to be part of that solution. You know, I think, and as these partnerships exist, you know, you look at the government, you look at the citizens, you look at activists, and then you have nonprofits, and nonprofits tend to pick up where the government leaves off. and it leaves off. I mean, that's essentially our role. Although we do it in partnership and in concert, which is amazing, we have seen, and I don't know if you could share, but robust funding over the past few years. Like, I cannot complain about how much funding has come down from the federal and state government, and even local, to our different, front-facing, where, not that we don't want more, I mean, be clear. But one of our concerns over the past few years is how do we responsibly sustain what we started, right? It's great to have a bunch of resources and put them into practice, but we all know, this is what keeps me up at night, is that contract going to exist next year? So never mind someone who's looking at SNAP benefits and figuring out, am I gonna have that food in my house next month? So I would say, as a community, we have to really think about, if it's not going to happen, what we're supposed to do, and how do we responsibly roll it back if that's the way it's going to go. I feel like we always get caught saying, oh, it's gonna happen, we're definitely gonna get it, and if it doesn't, we're not ready, right? So I'm advocating for more conversation about what you brought up, which was perfect. We're just not sure what the future holds. There's no playbook for post-COVID, is there? We're not sure what is supposed to happen next, but more of these conversations is definitely going to help.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. One of the things that I've noticed in the 6 short weeks I've been in office is I've gotten a lot of phone calls from people who are on the verge of being homeless. And a lot of them are seniors who are, way over their heads with rent, and they can't access senior housing, and so they're not eating. And I feel like there is this silent hunger out there where these folks are not necessarily going to the food pantry. Particularly in communities, I think, like Swampscott and Marblehead, where it seems like everyone is really doing so well. And in reality, you've got an enormous percentage of people who aren't doing well at all. But because there's this veneer, there's a reluctance to actually reach out and get help. I was very fortunate to volunteer at Anchor with Laura, and one of the most wonderful things about the experience was when you go into Anchor, she greets you and she greets your children, and she makes it seem like they are just coming in and going shopping. And it's that experience that takes the edge off. And I think if a lot of people had that same experience, they would be more willing to access a resource like that. At the Marblehead Food Pantry, I believe we give out bags. I love the idea of just coming in and going shopping, but there are so many people who just won't do it. And so I'm wondering if there are some outreach strategies for this quiet hunger that is in communities that seem super affluent and pulled together, but really aren't. Thank you.
Not a solution. Maybe you don't work together, Jason. Thank you, Jenny. And so many of you here in this room have been in and worked at the pantry, so you know what I'm saying. That is so important, the outreach. When we first opened, we worked closely with the senior center and with the schools, with our school staff, on really pulling in families that were in need. Since then, we've worked closely with the VFW and with Mike Sweeney, our veterans agent, to do outreach. But it's hard for people to come in. I have a couple of people that come in and shop for their parents because they know their parents are not going to come in. And so we do that. In a lot of our new visitors that come that have maybe are not newly in need of us, but of new to the pantry, come because of the word of mouth. Their friends tell them, you should go there. It's really great. You can, go and pick your own food. They're really friendly, and that's how some of our new people come in. This is where I don't have an answer because there are a lot of things we can do. We continue to work with these groups that we know where the population is that probably does need to come in. And it's just continually reaching out. We do our Thanksgiving meals, so our Thanksgiving meals are available to anybody in the community, and we really put an emphasis at the school level of sharing, like, we'll deliver you this Thanksgiving meal, and we stuff that bag with information on the pantry, like, this is when you can come, this is how you can reach us, and we give them amazing food for the Thanksgiving holiday, and it, to maybe entice them, though that's one way. And we usually do get a few new families through that effort. Just getting them, once they come in the door, they will come. It's getting them, and it's breaking that stigma. Somehow, I would say, one thing. We have a lot of kids that come in to volunteer, maybe the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, Little League, we show them around, and I tell them, like, because we don't allow, we only allow volunteers at 18 and over when we're open for the pantry. A lot of students come in and shop with their families. And I try to tell kids, you don't know who's coming in. You don't know. You don't know which one of your neighbors. So being conscious of what you're saying to people, so that they don't feel like that is a stigma, just, you never know who you're talking to. So it's just I don't know how we break the stigma of coming in, and, I really don't.
Oh, yeah, no. Sure, here, yeah. Thanks for that. That was a great setup. I want to, sort of play off of what you've said during that recent cold snap we had, and how amazing is it? Last week it was, minus 18 or something. I personally was involved in 2 placements in 2 different homeless shelters. Both of the people came from Marblehead, right? Which is, it doesn't surprise me, it surprises a lot of people. I say that because there is a stigma. About 2 weeks ago, we had an event in Salem, a public forum on homelessness. Just come in and talk about it. Someone who had come through one of the shelters, unprovoked, stood up. And I didn't know this part of her story, but her husband had committed suicide. She sort of, suffered internally, silent suffering, right? Lived in her car for 2 years. And she sort of broke down and said, I lived in my car for 2 years because a lot of you people here today and a lot of what you're saying made me feel like I couldn't walk into a shelter. Made me feel that I was less than if I asked for help. Made me feel bad about the situation I was in. So we see it. I mean, that's not a solution. I can tell you that we have to do more advocating in I'm going to make up a word. Is it destigmifying? I mean, there must be some word out there that means this. But I being in homelessness services, I'm very sensitive to new phrases that I wouldn't have before. But I had a family member the other day say, "Oh, I look homeless today." It was very sort of, and most of us like, "Oh, you laugh." Well, think about what you just said. What does that mean, you look homeless today? And those are things we throw around all the time in just casual conversation. I heard someone else who I really love and respect very well said, "Oh, yeah, he looks like a beggar." I'm like, "Oh man," So I think being a little more sensitive to such things, and I know I'm not sort of saying everyone has to be woke. But being sensitive to what this is. Homelessness is real. There are a lot of folks that I know and love and have lived with and who are 1 or 2 bad decisions or paychecks away from not eating, not having a house, right? Not having an apartment. And by the way, we don't see that getting better quicker. We need more housing. You touched on homelessness and housing. Is there a correlation between housing and food insecurity? Absolutely. You need a place to eat, right? You need a place to lay your head. I think of it as the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We do a lot of food with the organization I run, but it really is to sort of get someone nourished so we can then begin those phases of helping them through their journey to get back into society, right? So I guess I don't have a good answer of how to keep talking about it. I think I've said that 5 times now, and I don't mean to, but definitely keep it of subject, making sure that you don't have to be embarrassed because you're facing homelessness. We live in Massachusetts, and to our public officials, there are a lot of resources. If they can be accessed, if you can navigate them, simplifying some of these systems might help too, right? You try to apply for benefits or get rental assistance, you can get 25 phone numbers. That's tough. That's tough for someone who's having trouble navigating. So I'd say, again, I'm gonna go with, try to simplify some of this. I think if we could work together as a community to simplify access to services, and then in destigmifying, and again, I made that word up, the homelessness and hunger, it's real. And it's not just in Lynn, it's not just in Lawrence, it's not, it is in Marblehead, it is in Swampscott. We have a food pantry up in West Newbury, can you imagine, right? So, yeah, that's all I have to say. So no solution. Maybe the senator has a solution.
I have another comment, sorry. You made me think, because back to universal free lunches, that and destigmatizing, right? So think of when we had free and reduced lunches, right? We grew up in schools, free, reduced lunch, or you paid full price. And everyone knew what color ticket you had, what the lunch lady was charging you. We don't have that now with free lunch program. Everybody gets free lunch. Nobody knows anybody's business. And that stigma's gone. So if we can sort of carry that out of school and into the greater community, maybe that's
So we've got, realistically, there are 2 things that we can do. Long term, it is we've got to speak about this, because as long as stigma exists, there'll always be this issue. In Lynn, we don't deal with it as much, but we still deal with it. So that's long term. We have to take away this, I'm using resources, so XYZ. As long as that's there, whether it's food or housing or what have you, there'll always be that stigma. Number 2, in the short term, delivery. That's discreet, going back to what you were saying, that's discreet, no one knows about it, it's just, and that has worked in Lynn. Number 2, the pantry could be integral, going back to Phoenix Food Hub, there is a food pantry, Catholic Charities is also in there, and so if folks are going there, it might not necessarily be for the food pantry, it could be for other things, but you see how it all ties back to stigma though, and folks are doing this because they don't want to be seen going to the food pantry, so those aren't perfect solutions, but the long term is we have to discuss it and destigmify. The notion around resources, and number 2, we can look at delivery and including food pantries in high trafficked areas where it won't be like, oh, hey, that person is going to the food pantry, even though there's nothing wrong with that.
Hi, I'm Ruth Griffin, and I live in Lynn, happily live in Lynn. I wanted to get back to food insecurity and think about Mary's question. As I was thinking, one of the things I thought about was it would be so wonderful if people could adopt a person who is going to the food pantry, maybe not by name, but if there's 500 people going to a food pantry, to be able to adopt that person and shop for them twice a month or once a month. But know that you do that repeatedly, and that I think that could help immensely. I started a food pantry myself in Norwood, Mass. Several years ago, and many of the pastors throughout the community didn't think we had a problem. So our job first was to advertise and walk to every one of them and make an appointment. And many of them said, there's no problem. There's no problem in this community. I was just thinking back to it when you were speaking. And so we started small to show them that there was a problem. And before you knew it, we had like 400 people coming to the pantry every week. And people really bought into it and became part of the pantry. They literally owned part of that pantry. And so that was just a thought that came to mind. And the other thing, because I'm not sure about this, is to advertise the hours of the pantry in the paper regularly so that people can see that. They can see where it is, the times that it's available. I just didn't see that a lot when I was looking myself. And I think that that's an important criteria for people, that it can be publicly mentioned and emphasize that food insecurity has grown among populations in each town.
Curious if there's any more questions. We're kind of getting ready to close this out. And actually, I'm going to sneak in something. I don't think I'm scheduled to say this, but we are having a reception, which we're encouraging the panelists to do. And we're not supposed to feel guilty about food. I mean, what our work should be is recognize we have food and then want it and figure out a way to get it to everyone else. But I do see there's another question.
Yes, hi, my name's Wiggs Amor. I'm from Somerville, but have a lot of interest in regional land use, transportation, environment, and health. And I didn't want to ask a question when there was such great focus on equity and kind of customer focus. But years ago, I was somewhere where there was a great description of the Boston Food Bank. And Boston has a scale that's different from other municipalities. And it also has a skew toward Rhode Island. That is, with the exception of East Boston, it pretty much goes from downtown almost halfway to Rhode Island. And I'm wondering about wholesale operation kind of that feeds into the retail operations here. Is there something on the north side of Boston that's similar to the Boston Food Bank?
So our organization orders from the Boston Food Bank, so that would be, it's close enough. However, the economies of scale are pretty wonky. You have to have a truck, you have to have a truck that has a gate, you have to have someone put on pallets. I mean, it gets complicated, right, for nonprofits that are just looking for food. However, they're robust, and as you said, they're fairly large. We have partnered, for example, with us, the Salem Food Pantry allows us to, they will go pick it up and store or deliver the food coming from the Boston Food Bank. So I think so we call them like alternate docks. Or we could go now to someplace closer than the Boston Food Bank to get that food. I don't see an organization of that magnitude on the North Shore, Northern Essex County. I feel like it's other pantries working in conjunction with the food bank to get that food up here. So I don't know if that helps to answer the question, but that's how we operate, is using an intermediary, which in our case would be Salem Food Pantry.
Same, so we utilize the Greater Boston Food Bank as well. So I will take this opportunity to talk about them a little bit and just to, again, express the need. We also partner with Salem Food Pantry. We're very fortunate, and they bring us our food. They pick up our food for us and deliver it to the anchor once a month, which is a great, amazing resource that they allow. But recently, since our numbers have doubled, so we were from March 2020 until last June of 2022, we were seeing about 45 to 50 families, about 40 to 45 families a month. Some came every week, some came every other week. Since July, we're 80 plus families a month. We are doubled. So recently, I had reached out to Greater Boston. We get 3,500 pounds of food from them at a great price. I mean, so I know you were talking sort of about wholesale or what, but very fortunate. But I did ask, can we need more? We were fortunate to get a commercial refrigerator recently to be able to fill with fresh fruits and vegetables. But the 3,500 just doesn't cut it for us to get. We can't get through the month with that amount of food, and they don't have the resources to provide us with additional, because everyone is asking. Everyone in the Greater Boston area is asking for it. If they could, they would. They are phenomenal. There's another place if you want to donate or volunteer. They're amazing, but they are struggling to keep food in the warehouse, just like we are. So I don't know if we're answering your question. We're sort of just.
So for Lynn, I know the majority of organizations, they utilize the Greater Boston Food Bank, and it is, that goes back to what I was saying where ingenuity and local government really should be thinking ahead. I know in Lynn we've secured vehicles, we've made sure the nonprofits have vehicles, even Phoenix Food Hub has like a storage space, so you do have to really think outside of the box in terms of getting it up here. And also Greater Boston Food Bank is amazing. I'm pretty sure that they serve this massive region here. And also, I'm going to use this time to plug in the fact that we don't have a Greater Boston Food Bank up here. We do have land, though, and ag is definitely part of food insecurity. We should look at farms up here. We should be looking at maybe sourcing stuff somehow, some way. That's where organizations like the Collaborative come into play, but ag is part of it. We do have some growing space, and we should really start thinking outside of the box in terms of how we're sourcing some of this stuff.
Lauren, hello. Here we go. Jack in the back? Sure. Make it a softball.
Actually, it's a comment. My name's Jack Butterworth. I'm a member of this church. Full disclosure, I'm also on the church board. And something that Ruth Griffin said a few minutes ago really touched me about ministers saying, we don't have that problem. This is an invisible problem. When I volunteered for the Red Cross a few years ago after Hurricane Katrina, I will never forget one man who came through the line of cars to get stuff from our distribution center, burst into tears as I was talking to him. He had always been able to support his family. The flood came, the hurricane came, and that was no longer possible. He felt ashamed. There's a stigma about admitting you don't have the money to get the food you need. And we need to make this problem visible, because when it is visible, we can start to solve it. And I want to thank Michael and Martha and Chris for the work that you did, and anyone else that I don't know the names of that helped to put this program together. I want to thank our speakers for coming here today. Thank you so much for taking the time and bringing out 40 people here on Super Bowl Sunday, which is amazing. Thank you all.
Wow, all right then. Wow, thanks, Jack. I should have signed you up for the closing remarks, because that was pretty much, you stole my thunder. So thank you to the panelists for joining us today on their day off. as well as the audience members for joining us on their day off. Want to thank, again, as we kind of get into the fact that a lot of this is a lot of the solutions in some respects are policy driven. It's great that Rep. Armini is here, Councilor Coco is here, Select Board Member Peter Spilios is here, that we can, become more knowledgeable about this issue and then be able to kind of push for hopefully long-term solutions. Providing help for those in need is something that is a core component of all major religions, and we're in a religious sanctuary right now, which I think reflects on the inherent desire of many of us to help our neighbors. Help can include providing a single meal to address the immediate need, or working on long-term policy efforts to address the structural components of this issue. All of this work is important and valuable. If you have additional questions, I'd like to welcome you to our parish hall. It's been an hour and a half, which has been a long time for our speakers who probably want to get home, but they're invited to enjoy the muffins I made late last night, and to mingle and to have further conversation. But I want to thank again our speakers, as well as everyone here for coming, and hopefully you walk away learning some new things. So thank you.